I'm the president of the United States. I'm not the president of other countries.
Donald Trump has been convicted on all 34 counts of falsifying business records in his historic trial on Thursday. With the presidential elections only in November, what does this mean for his chances of becoming president? According to the polls, Mr. Trump is favorite, and by some margin. But can you still be elected president if you are a convicted criminal? Well, not since Eugene V. Debs campaigned from a prison cell more than a century ago has the United States experienced what is now happening. A prominent candidate with felony convictions running for president. And never before has that candidate been someone with a real chance of winning. So let's try and rifle through some of the facts and start to determine what is next for Trump and hopefully answer some of your questions. According to U.S. law after Trump's conviction, yes, he can still run for president. The Constitution sets very few eligibility requirements for presidents. They must be at least 35 years old, be natural-born citizens, and have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. There are no limitations based on character or criminal record. While some states prohibit felons from running for state and local office, these laws do not apply to federal offices. The Republican and Democratic parties have guaranteed spots on general election ballots in every state, and the parties tell election officials whose name to put in their spot. States could, in theory, try to keep Mr. Trump off the ballot by passing legislation requiring a clean criminal record, but this would be on legally shaky ground. Cast your minds back to the Capitol riots where thousands stormed the Capitol building, destroyed government property, harmed police officers, and one rioter was shot dead. Trump played a big part in that, and due to the 14th Amendment, which I am not totally fluent in, it states that people who engaged in insurrection or rebellion cannot run for president, but that was beaten away by the Supreme Court. Funnily enough, it was a Supreme Court led by Republicans which let him off the hook with this one. Legally, Mr. Trump would remain eligible to be president even if he were imprisoned. The Constitution says nothing to the contrary. I don't think that the farmers ever thought we were going to be in this situation, Professor Levinson said. In practice, the election of an incarcerated president would create a legal crisis that would almost certainly need to be resolved by the courts. Now, could Trump pardon himself if he is reelected? A presidential pardon is not an option in relation to the New York case, and would not be in the Georgia case either, because the president does not have pardon power for state charges. If he were convicted in one of the two federal cases before the election, an increasingly unlikely prospect, given his lawyer's success in delaying both of those cases, he could try to pardon himself or to commute his sentence after getting into office. That would leave his conviction in place but end his imprisonment. Either action would be an extraordinary assertion of presidential power, and the Supreme Court would be the final arbiter of whether a self-pardon was constitutional. And what if he is elected with the case still in process? In the two federal cases, most likely, a Trump-appointed attorney general would withdraw the charges. The Justice Department does not indict sitting presidents, a policy outlined in a 1973 memo during the Nixon era. It has never had reason to develop a policy on what to do with an incoming president who has already been indicted. But the rationale for not indicting sitting presidents, that it would interfere with their ability to perform their duties, applies just as well in this hypothetical scenario. The reasons why we wouldn't want to indict a sitting president are the reasons we wouldn't want to prosecute a sitting president, said Professor Chemerinsky, who has disagreed with the department's reasoning. My guess is, if the Trump prosecution were still ongoing in some way and Trump were elected, the Justice Department, which would be the Trump Justice Department, would say, "We're following the 1973 memo." Like so much else here, this would be legally untested, and it is impossible to say what the Supreme Court would do if the question reached it. To us, it sounds like prolonging the trial for as long as possible could be a safe way into office for Trump. Holding out till November for the trial could mean he gets away with his wrongdoings. And with the corrupt nature of U.S. politics and its right-wing tendencies, as long as Trump has the cash and he has flirted with the right people, anything is possible. And in this eventuality, what are Trump's current policies for his return to power? When it comes to economics, he is very much in the same school of thought as Javier Milei, who we covered in our previous video. Less regulations, less tax, more fun. Make sure to check out that video. It's a real goodie as well. That subscribe button is looking extra appealing today. And when it comes to immigration, one of the main policies for any Western leader in the 21st century. Trump is promising to revive first-term policies that will seal the border and to carry out the largest deportation operation in U.S. history. The Republican has also pledged to end birthright citizenship for the children of undocumented migrants and to wage war on Mexican drug cartels. The conversation of abortion rights has become very prominent in the media, and therefore a big way to gain or lose voters. And Trump has been relatively careful to not upset any demographic of voters. Trump's stance on the matter is that he intends to allow individual states to decide their own abortion laws, and does not want to impose a countrywide law on the matter. He also condemned Arizona and Alabama for having passed extremely harsh and dangerous new laws regarding abortion. In terms of his opposition, Joe Biden is pushing his belief of continuing to improve the economy from the bottom up, investing in the necessary infrastructure, clean energy, and new job opportunities. And so far in his first term, he has been successful, despite some inflation, which you cannot necessarily blame on him, due to the current crisis the planet is facing. Biden believes in a more humane approach to immigration, but is expected to limit official border crossing and give more powers to throw out illegal immigrants swiftly, and if needed, forcefully. As well, Biden believes that women have the right to choose if they would like an abortion. As for taxes in America, he plans to increase the rate for the highest earners and impose far higher taxes on China, including a 100% tax on imported electric Chinese vehicles. Bad news for all of you invested in them. Whilst on the topic of Trump, shall we have a little recap of Trump's worst moments since he plagued our screens? A personal favorite of mine. During the COVID pandemic, as scientists and doctors worked endlessly to present a vaccine for the virus, Dr. Trump came up with a brilliant idea. Why don't we try injecting disinfectant? Trump, armed with the knowledge that on a surface, a table, for example, bleach or disinfectant could kill the virus pretty quickly. His feeble mind immediately jumped to the possibility of putting such liquids inside the human body. I remember watching this on the news and thinking, what a fucking moron. His poor medical staff must have been sick to death with his input. Now, for any of you lucky enough to have read Trump's book from 2004, this won't be news to you, but for what I imagine is the majority, let's shed some light onto his opinion of women and their role in business. He said, "All of the women on The Apprentice flirted with me, consciously or unconsciously. That's to be expected." Following that up with, "It's certainly not groundbreaking news that the early victories by the women on The Apprentice were, to a very large extent, dependent on their sex appeal." And not in his book, but equally offensive, he states, "It doesn't really matter what the media write as long as you've got a young and beautiful piece of ass." Well, as the months count down, we are starting to understand the landscape more surrounding Trump and his shot at presidency, with many variables, many we haven't mentioned in this video. We will, of course, be updating you with the next steps in his trial and also shedding more light on what could happen post the November elections. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and make sure you have a wonderful day. Thanks from Politics Playground.